talk tends to be focused, towards Baha'is as rather than introductory talk. I don't want to leave anybody behind or anybody out, so I'm going to be including some basic historical facts. The Tablet of Ahmad is a special writing of Baha'u'llah that's included in the prayer book. I think it's the only quote-unquote tablet that's included as a prayer. Many Baha'is use it as a prayer, and it's become a favorite prayer with a tremendous magnetic attraction for many Baha'is all over the world for many years. I would like to, very few of us, and myself included, knew who Ahmad was and what the significance of this is. So I want to talk about this first. It's going to take 20 to 30 minutes to tell you the story, to make it interesting, and then we'll go from there into some of the themes and concepts in the tablet. It's drawn from two sources. Mr. Faizi published a two-part article in Baha'i News in March, April 1967 called The Flame of Fire, and then Aditya Herzadeh in The Revelation of Baha'u'llah, Volume 2, has a chapter on the Tablet of Ahmad. Both of those accounts draw very heavily in Ahmad's spoken chronicle, which is the original source, but we don't have that anymore. Ahmad was born around 1805 in the city of Yazd, Persia. When he was about 15, a young teenager, he developed a tremendous passion for mysticism. And he would leave his house, he would go off by himself and pray and meditate. And this led to tremendous arguments with his family who didn't like this lifestyle. So one morning, Ahmad got up, packed a little bundle, told his family he was going to the public bath, and left town. Now, I've been told that in Persian culture, in the beginning of the 1800s, this was totally unheard of. People did not leave their family. But Ahmad's passion for mysticism and what was developing in his heart was to find the promised one of God. Now, I remind you, about this time, all over the world, there was tremendous messianic fervor developing. And this is in the 1820s through 1840s. In the Middle East, in the religion of Muhammad, the religion of Islam, there were many, many promises and prophecies and traditions for the return, the coming of the Qayyim. He who will arise. He was the promised one. And Ahmad in his heart, Ahmad developed this lifelong quest. The purpose of his life was to find the promised one. So he spent years now, he started as a young teenager, he spent years traveling around Persia. He found a mystic who had a ceremony, a ritual. Ahmad zealously devoted. He took part in this ritual, hoping and expecting that he would be guided to find the promised one. And he continued. When he wasn't guided, he left, he went and found someone else, and continued just wandering around Persia year after year doing this. He finally gave up on Persia, because he wasn't getting anywhere, and he traveled to India, I believe to Bombay, where he did the same thing. India, the home of mystics, now and beginning in the mid-1800s also. And he followed these different practices, always, devotedly, trying to find the promised one. While he was in India, he was told that if he would put on spotlessly clean garments and prostrate himself and repeat a verse from the Quran 12,000 times. Okay, now prostration, I believe, is you're down on your knees and praying like this.
That's right.
Can you imagine 12,000 times?
I wish I knew what verse he was saying.
Okay.
Allahu
I
Akbar,
know.
maybe. Allahu Akbar. Maybe.
There is no God but God.
Allahu Akbar. Yeah, something like that. Okay.
There is no God but Mr.
La
Faizi
ilaha
says
illallah.
there is no
La ilaha
God but
illallah.
God. I will come back to that. I don't want to leave the story of Ahmad. And when we come to the Tablet of Ahmad, I hope to be able to have time to discuss the significance of it and its relationship to the Tablet of Ahmad. So Mr. Faizi reports Ahmad did this not once, but several times. Can you imagine his devotion, his dedication? And still he wasn't guided. Finally, disillusioned from all his searching, he returned to Persia, settled down in the city of Kashan, and married and became cloth weaver. This spans a period of more than 20 years in which he searched. From all I don't know of any other account if we have anyone in the history of the faith who spent a quarter of a century, 25 years, in search. Such dedication and devotion. Now let's ask ourselves, historically, let's look at the time frame, why wasn't he guided? Why wasn't God helping him out? Okay? He was born around 1805. He was about 15 or so when he began his quest, left home. Well, that takes us up to the year what? 1820. About that time, he started his search. Now, we know as Baha'is, we know that the Bab, who is the Qayyam, who declared the Qayyam, declared his mission in when?
1844.
1844. Ahmad starts his search in 1820. When was the Bab born?
1870.
No,
1819.
1819. So why did Ahmad find the Bab? The Bab was a year or two old when he started searching for him. So this is important too. So now we come up to about the year right after the Bab declares, sometime late 1844, 1845. Ahmad has, although he stopped searching, he settled down, he hasn't given up in his heart to find the promised land. One evening, a traveler coming through town hints at that the promised one has appeared and declared. Ahmad questions the traveler, who won't tell him anything. Because historically, at this time, the clergy is so fanatical that if you teach openly, you'd be persecuted, tortured, and possibly killed. But the traveler tells Ahmad, if you'll go to the city of Meshed and there seek up a certain mullah, he'll be certain to tell him about it. What does Ahmad do? The next morning he gets up without telling anybody and takes off. Leaves on foot, travels to Meshed, and I believe that's about 500 miles or so. He gets to Meshed and he's exhausted and sick for a month. He's finally able to get out of bed. He goes right to the mullah's house, knocks on the door, demands from the servant that he see the mullah. He goes to the mullah and he tells him that, I guess, that he's been searching. He wants him to tell him about the promised land. What does the mullah think? The mullah thinks this guy is crazy. He's come here, he's a troublemaker, the mom's outside, he's going to have me persecuted and tortured or killed. What does the mullah do? He throws Ahmad out of the house. Poor Ahmad, he spent 25 years at search. He was promised that he came to Meshed, he'd find out, and the guy throws him out of the house. So Ahmad resolves to continue in spite of the difficulties. He comes back the next day, knocks on the door again, begs the servant to see the master, goes to the mullah, and by the grace of God, the mullah realizes he's sincere. He's not a troublemaker. So the mullah tells him to go to the mosque that night and follow a certain person through the streets, and then they'll find out. So here's Ahmad, total trust, right? Goes to the mosque. After the service, he follows this guy through the dark streets, doesn't know who he is, where he's going, and he's led to this house. He's taken upstairs to the second floor, where all the windows are covered up, so no light will get out, so no one outside knows what's going on. There he meets some of the very early believers, and he's taught about the faith of the Bab. In about a week of being taught, he accepts the Bab and recognizes his promised land. God, after 25 years, has fulfilled his heart's desire, his lifelong quest, and he recognizes the Bab. And this is our Ahmad. Okay, he stays on, and they deepen him, and he gains more knowledge, and finally one of the early believers instructs him that it's time for him to go back to Sham and settle down. He returns to his town and settles down, and eventually meets another believer, Haji Mirzajani, a wealthy merchant. And so they have two believers in Kashan, which is wonderful. Now, at some point here, the Bab, who is under house arrest, is ordered by the government. He is exiled from his home in Shiraz up to the fortress in Makub, in the northwest corner of Persia, Iran. On the journey, he passes through Kashan. Now, Haji Mirzajani manages to persuade the guards, to bribe the guards, to have the Bab stay in his house there. And Ahmad gets to meet the Bab. So again, God has rewarded him for his 25 years loyalty and devotion. He gets to meet the Bab. And there's a couple of beautiful stories that will take too long. I got to go on. Now we're going to jump. Okay, to about the year 1856. But in jumping, we need to look historically what's happened. We know that the mission of the Bab lasted 6 years, and then in 1850, by order of the Prime Minister of Persia, he was put to death. And his death warrant was signed by the leading clergy in the city of Tabriz. He was shot by a garrison of 750 soldiers. And the Bab in all his teachings proclaimed that he was preparing all his people to accept the one who would come after him, the one whom God shall make manifest, the promised one of all ages. And we know that after the martyrdom of the Bab in 1850, the people began, his followers began to gravitate towards Baha'u'llah, who had made no claim for himself. In August 1852, there was an assassination attempt on the Shah, and the Shah unjustly and wrongfully blamed Baha'u'llah for organizing it. And Baha'u'llah was taken to the dungeon, the Shah's dungeon in Tehran called the Black Pit, where he spent 4.5 months there, at the intercession of the Russian ambassador who knew Baha'u'llah's innocence. The Shah, about the end of 1852, released Baha'u'llah and gave him 3 weeks to get out of the country. He exiled him for life. So Baha'u'llah, who had been chained, was very ill and weak. Only 3 weeks later, in the middle of winter, in January 1853, was exiled. He chose to go to Baghdad. So in the middle of the winter, they go across the mountains. They get to Baghdad sometime in the spring of 1853. He's been exiled from his country permanently. Some of the early believers also went to Baghdad. They settled down to develop a community there. But there's tremendous dissension, tremendous controversy. There's some internal enemies. One of them, the half-brother of Baha'u'llah, who were very jealous of Baha'u'llah's popularity and its prestige and so forth. And so there's a lot of undermining going on. In addition, during this time period, some 25 people, followers of the Baha'is, making claims that they're really the promised one. So in early 1854, Baha'u'llah, because of all this dissension, leaves. He goes off by himself to the mountains of Kurdistan, settles in the caves as a dervish, as a hermit, and spends 2 years there. Sometime in early 1856, his family hears rumors of this wonderful, mystical, spiritual dervish Muhammad, and they know it must be their beloved Baha'u'llah. So they send an uncle to ask him, beg him to come back. And Baha'u'llah agrees. And he returns sometime in late spring 1856 to Baghdad. And then this time period, from that time when he returns to 1863, when he's again banished, are the glory years in Baghdad. Can you hear me over this? Okay. Are the glory years. And there's wonderful, wonderful accounts. Although Baha'u'llah was nominally a prisoner, he was free to roam about the town. He openly taught. He went to the coffee house. Friends came and visited his house, which he later called the most great house. There are, well, I understand, there are inner apartments, there are outer apartments, there's a place for visitors and guests. His house was always filled with guests. Baha'u'llah, although he had made no claim, was revealing tablets every day. So in the evening, the friends would gather. Baha'u'llah would serve tea with his own hands. They would have discussions. They would read the tablets. Nabil, the great historian, says, "Oh, for the wonder of those days and the joy of those hours." This is the scene in Baghdad, very briefly, when Baha'u'llah rejuvenated the whole community, because in his absence, it had totally fallen apart. The morals were gone. Essentially, the Baha'i community was dead. And Baha'u'llah resurrected it. And when he returned, it became obvious who the true leader was. And so the community became on fire. More people gravitated to Baghdad to come see Baha'u'llah. In addition, the Sufis, the mystical, Muslims in the mountains of Kurdistan, had come to know Baha'u'llah when he was up there. And some of the leaders, were very renowned Sufis, would come down to Baghdad and ask him for this Darvish Muhammad. And they would be directed to Baha'u'llah. And this astounded the people of Baghdad and increased their admiration and respect for Baha'u'llah. Okay, that's our historical context. Now back to Ahmad. He's in Kashan, they're teaching in Kashan, and more people are becoming Baha'is, and Ahmad is starting to teach open, can't hide his faith. Then persecutions begin, and a mob attacks Ahmad's house, and he has to hide in the middle of the house. And he has to hide out for 40 days. Friends come and in the nighttime and bring him food, and they encourage him to leave so that he won't lose his life. So Ahmad decides to leave Kashan, and he goes to Baghdad. And he meets Baha'u'llah. And he's overcome that first meeting with the power and glory of Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah grants Ahmad the inestimable bounty and privilege of being one of the very few who is allowed to live in the outer apartments of Baha'u'llah's own house in Baghdad. And there he remains. He gets to visit Baha'u'llah, what? Almost every day? We don't know. He gets to be with the friends who are with Baha'u'llah every evening. He has a tablet, Ahmad has a tablet in Baha'u'llah's own handwriting from this period, when Baha'u'llah confirms that on one occasion, Baha'u'llah revealed to Ahmad, showed him a glimpse of his inner glory. When we read the history of the faith, there are very few individuals, I think maybe you can count them on one hand, who had this experience of having seen and been granted a glimpse of Baha'u'llah's inner glory. So now, very briefly, reflect back on the Tablet of Ahmad, when Baha'u'llah says, "Oh Ahmad, forget not my bounties while I am absent. Remember my days during thy days." It's like this wonderful love letter from a very, very dear friend to another. Remember when you were in Baghdad, living in my outer apartments, I granted you this bounty. Remember when you saw my inner glory. Remember that we were there together every day and all the bounties and the great times we shared together. See, there are overtones of that in the Tablet of Ahmad. Baha'u'llah did not make any declaration of who he was at the time of his banishment in April 1863. The time from 1852, when he came out of the dungeon, to 1863 was a time of grace, when the world was not yet ready to take on the weight of this new revelation, this promised revelation. Allah says this was a grace period to prepare the people of the world to be able to bear the weight of this new revelation. But there were a few who, during this period, recognized the true station of Baha'u'llah, and Ahmad was one of those. So look at the bounty of God. Ahmad spent 25 years in search of the Promised One. He recognized the Bab. He got to meet the Bab. He gets to meet Baha'u'llah, live in his outer apartment, and he recognizes before Baha'u'llah declares his true station. This is our Ahmad. Okay, now we come up to this time in 1863, when the enemies of the cause have been agitating, the Persian ambassador in Baghdad has been agitating the Ottoman government, saying things like Baha'u'llah's an enemy, stirring up trouble, he's going to start a revolution. So finally, the order comes down from the Sultan of Turkey to the governor of Baghdad, saying, we want to summon Baha'u'llah to Constantinople. There's an attempt to humiliate him. And on the eve of his banishment, further exile from Baghdad, Baha'u'llah goes to this garden which one of his friends has allowed him to be in. All the people of the town are coming out to visit him, and on the first day in this garden, called the Garden of Rizwan, you know this is the time of Rizwan, Baha'u'llah makes this declaration to his family and close followers that he indeed is the one promised by the Bab, him whom God shall make manifest. And Shoti Effendi writes, and God passes by, that Baha'u'llah turned what was to be a humiliation into a day and a time of great glory and celebration. And it is the greatest festival in the Baha'i world now, every year, this time of Wisdom. When Baha'u'llah leaves, beginning of May 1863, he takes with him 72 of his family and followers. Included, he takes a couple of the troublemakers to try to keep tabs on him. And he asks a few of his followers to remain behind, and he doesn't take them with him. Among those whom he asks to remain behind is Ahmad, our dear loved Ahmad. Baha'u'llah travels to Constantinople. When you get to the royal city, it was expected that you go beg favors from, everybody in the court. And Baha'u'llah refuses to have anything to do with this kind of behavior. So within 6 months, the Sultan and his ministers decide they don't want any more to do with Baha'u'llah, and they exiled him to the northwest corner of the Ottoman Empire, a little city called Adrianople, which is in modern-day Bulgaria. And what's the purpose? They're trying to get him as far away as possible from everybody. Okay, so that's within 6 months. So that's the beginning of 1864. So historically, that's where Baha'u'llah is now. Ahmad is faithful and obedient to Baha'u'llah. He stays in Baghdad, he teaches the friends, and after about a year and a half, he cannot stand being separated from Baha'u'llah any longer. This is very important when you begin to look at the tablet and the themes. So what does Ahmad do? He sets off from Baghdad to walk all the way to Adrianople and visit Baha'u'llah. When he gets to Constantinople, a distance over 1,000 miles, there is a tablet waiting for him from Baha'u'llah, which Ahmad refers to as the tablet of the Nightingale of Paradise. And remember now, he can no longer stand being separated from Baha'u'llah. He's walked 1,000 miles on his way to get to Baha'u'llah. Ahmad, the spoken chronicle, says, I received the tablet of the Nightingale of Paradise, and reading it many times, I found out that my Lord desired me to go teach his cause. Therefore, I preferred obedience to visiting. He cannot stand being separated from Baha'u'llah. He reads his tablet many times, finds out that Baha'u'llah is instructing him. He says, go teach his cause. What does he do? He leaves Constantinople, returns, walks all the way back to Persia, a distance of at least 1,300 miles. What does he do when he gets to Persia? He starts traveling around all the communities, teaching the Baha'is the truth of the claim of Baha'u'llah. Now, there's a couple of issues or themes here which we're going to discuss, okay, when we finish the story. We're very near them. But let's look at a couple of facts here. You know, I used to think Ahmad was a young guy when he did this. When is it? This is around end of 1864, beginning of 1865. When did they say Ahmad was born? 1905. How old is he? 60 years old. Maybe we should call him Ahmad, the Great Walker. 60 years old, he's walked 1,000 miles. He turns around, walks 1,300 miles, and then travels around Persia. Now, again, historically, let's back up so we understand what's going on. Well, when Baha'u'llah was banished from Baghdad, that was when he made his public declaration to his family and close followers that he indeed was promised. He's exiled to Constantinople. Within 6 months, after Adrianople, none of the followers of the Bab back in Persia know the truth of his claim. And remember, there's no email in those days, right? So how is he going to communicate this? He has to send representatives back. In addition, the enemies of the cause, internal and external, have been agitating in Persia and stirring up trouble and rumors. Among the enemies, the worst was the half-brother of Baha'u'llah and his henchmen. Okay? His half-brother was a very cowardly person. He used to hide out all the time. But imagine, Baha'u'llah raised him with his own hands. But imagine that he was so envious and so, wanted so much power and leadership that he imagined himself really the true one. And they had henchmen, they sent them back to Persia, and they were making up stories. They wrote out in the Baha'i community saying that the Sayyid Yahya, his half-brother, that he was really the true one, the promised one of the Bab, and what Baha'u'llah had done was put him in prison, forced him to write, reveal the word of God, and Baha'u'llah stole the writings and was pretending it was his own. As preposterous as it sounds, these were the kinds of stories they told. But the Baha'is, who had no direct communication with Baha'u'llah, had no idea. They did not know what the truth was. So Baha'u'llah had to send his most trusted disciples, most loyal followers, back to Persia to teach the Baha'i community the truth of his claim. He revealed tablets for them, and there were a few. Taharzadeh says names two. He names Nabil, and he names Munib, and he says in there some others, and I don't know their names. But let's look here. Ahmad gets to Constantinople, gets this tablet, reads it over many times, and says, I found out that Allah, my Lord, desired me to go teach. And he returns to Persia. So we may conclude with hindsight that Ahmad was one of the chosen few and sent by Baha'u'llah back to Persia to teach the Baha'i community. Okay, now, Taharzadeh also cites an account from Mirza Hyder Ali, historian, that what these teachers accomplished in the space of several years, about 3 years, end of 1864, 1867, roughly that time period. Over 99% of the followers of the Bab in Persia became Baha'is. They recognized Baha'u'llah and they accepted him and they became Baha'is. This is unheard of in the history of religion. How many Hindus became Buddhists? How many Jews became Christians? How many Jews and Christians became Muslims? How many Muslims became Baha'is, followers of the Bab? Percentage-wise, very few. But we know that all the writings of the Bab, he said everything he did was to prepare his people for the acceptance of Baha'u'llah. I digress and tell you one story. Now, so, this is unheard of. But in his promise, I want to also constrain my time. In his promised day of God, over 99% of the followers of the Bab became Baha'is. That's wonderful. That's the foundation of the Baha'i community in Persia. That's the foundation of the Baha'i community throughout the world. And Ahmad, our dear, loved, devoted, dedicated Ahmad, was one of those who did this. This is the power, the preciousness of this happening. Mr. Faizi writes that Ahmad became the very embodiment of his own talent. He says, thank you. Such tenacity, undaunted spirit, steadfastness, and perseverance as Ahmad demonstrated are hardly to be found in any annals of the cause of God. The very embodiment of his own life. He lived to be about 100 years old, and he never again got a chance to visit Baha'u'llah. So there's a mystery here. We want to talk about it in the tablet. We want to talk about two things now. Okay? First of all, Ahmad says, after reading his tablet many times, he found out that his Lord desired him to go teach his cause, therefore he preferred obedience to his king, and he returned to God. So we know from Ahmad's life that above all else, the Tablet of Ahmad is a teaching tablet. It's a call by Baha'u'llah to rise and teach his cause. Now, when I tell this to teachers after telling the story, I often have quite a few people say, I never thought of the tablet. How could it be that? And, I have to say to you, I didn't know that until I read this Tablet of Ahmad. Okay, so get out your prayer books. We want to look, what we want to do first. So we know from Ahmad's account. If Ahmad hadn't told us, we wouldn't know this probably. So I'd like to first, let's briefly look at the tablet. Now that we know that Ahmad said this, understand something else here. It's very interesting. Ahmad says he read it over many times. Notice he does not say, I read it once and found this out. What's many times, 10, 100? How long did it take him? A day, a week, a month? We don't know. But we know he's devoted. Here's the other thing. How about you? Okay, we can no longer stand being separated from Baha'u'llah. We walk 1,000 miles, we get this tablet, we read it, and say, gee, what's Baha'u'llah saying? I would have said, gee, I'm going to go visit Baha'u'llah and ask him what he means. Ahmad, what? He read it until he figured it out himself. There's a spiritual lesson here. Anyways, that's his devotion. And then that brings us up the other mystery which we want to look at the tablet. What is in this tablet that enabled Ahmad to give up this desire to go visit Baha'u'llah and return to teach and be happy about it? He never complained, oh, Baha'u'llah didn't let me visit him. For the rest of his life, he was happy and content, he was joyous, he served his friends, he taught the cause. There's got to be something. Baha'u'llah doesn't punish people for being loyal and steadfast. He rewards them. So there's a mystery I suggest to you. There's got to be something in his tablet that consoled his heart and empowered him to be able to give up this desire to be with Baha'u'llah physically. I suggest this is one of the mysteries and is power in his tablet. So these are the two things you want to look at, and we have time to look at other things. Okay? Am I talking 1,000 miles an hour? Okay, got to do this all in an hour. All right, you have the tablet open? Okay, the first paragraph. The Nightingale of Paradise, which in one sense, and we're going to talk about multiple levels of meaning. We're Baha'is. We know the Baha'u'llah says the meaning of the Word of God can never be exhausted. Abdul Baha, the Congregation of Universal Peace, says every word of the Word of God has 1,000 and more meanings. So when we try to understand something like the Tablet of Ahmad, or any other writing of Baha'u'llah, we can't do this either-or game. Life's not a beer commercial. Tastes great, let's go. Okay? So when we look at this, you may be afraid that you already have an idea and understanding what it means. We may say, well, it also seems to mean this. Well, it's not either-or. There's levels of meaning which fit, because that's what Baha'u'llah explains to us. And it's very important we change our Western American way of either-or and look at how things fit, these multiple levels of meaning. And it's very, very important. So, the Nightingale of Paradise, in one sense, it seems very reasonable that that's a symbol of Baha'u'llah himself. Okay, what's the Nightingale of Paradise doing? He's singing. Okay, let's talk about what that means. Now, in this whole first paragraph, there's 4 verbs. And it says what the Nightingale of Paradise is doing. What's the first one? Singing on the twigs tree to doing what? Proclaiming to the sincere ones. What's the next verb?
Who is the sincere one?
Proclaiming to the sincere ones, that's the first one. The next one is calling the believers. What's the next one? Informing the severed ones. What's the last one? Guiding the lovers. So the nightingale of paradise is proclaiming, calling, informing, guiding. What's that?
Teaching.
I would think that's teaching. This is amazing, because the more you look at the Tablet of Ahmad from this point of view, you find out these little things, and after a while you get to the point of saying, my God, the whole tablet's about teaching, in one sentence. You know, the other night, Kambiz said that one of the counselors said that we should read in Tablets of Baha'u'llah on page 196, that tablet for protection. On page 196, Allah says, say, to assist me is to teach my cause. This is a theme, he says, with which whole tablets are laid. This is the changeless commandment of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. And I wonder, when he says this is a theme with which whole tablets are laid, if in one sense, one little sense, he may not be alluding to the Tablet of Ahmad as one of those tablets. Okay. All right. So now we see this. Now let's go first, the next thing. What's the nightingale paradise doing? The very first verse is what? Right. It does not say, lo, behold the nightingale of paradise sitting silently on the twigs of the tree of eternity. The singing implies he's out there, right? Okay. The revelation of divine verses. The revelation of the Word of God.
Holy and sweet melodies.
Yeah. The revelation. Singing is the revelation. Well, I think. Remember, I have no authority for this. I just suggest it. Okay. No, we have I believe it's 4 references from the Guardian. They're all about apparently people asking questions about the flame of fire. We'll get to that. Hopefully. All right. 2 paragraphs later in the Tablet of Ahmad. Oh, Ahmad. What does it say? Oh, Ahmad. Bear thou witness. What does that mean? Testimony. Christians witness to the truth of Christ and the gospel, right? Occasionally I've heard Baha'i say, well, we don't have anything in Baha'i writings that says we're supposed to witness. That's not what this says. Bear thou witness. Now, I don't know about you, how many times have we read that? Never thought what it really meant. Okay. Let's go down a couple more paragraphs. The one that begins, thus saith the nightingale that is calling to you from this prison. Now, in one sense, we can take this, and in only one sense, we can take this linearly, sequentially. This first sentence in that paragraph says, He's called unto you. Thus saith the nightingale that is called unto you from his prison. And in the next sentence, then we can say is his call. Only in one sentence. What's the next sentence say?
He has what to do with this clear message.
So what's his call unto you?
His message.
Deliver this clear message.
So we don't know if these are the things that Ahmad found, but with Ahmad's guidance that his Lord was telling him to go teach, we begin to find things which may, on one level, in one sense, be indicative of this. Let's go several paragraphs beyond now, and there's a paragraph that begins, "Oh, Ahmad, forget now my bounties." Okay. And I'll come back to that one in a minute. We go to the next paragraph, and it says, "Be thou as a flame of fire to my enemies, and..."
River of life eternal.
What's the river of life eternal? What is the implication? What is river? What is life eternal? What does Abdullah say the symbol of water is?
Source of knowledge.
Knowledge of God, right?
Word of God.
Excuse me?
I said the river of life eternal is the word of God.
Yeah. So what is he telling Ahmad to be?
Teacher.
Convey the word of God to my loved ones.
And be now to those who doubt.
Okay.
Establishing faith, the word of God, complete faith.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then a little later on, he says, "For the people are wandering in the paths of delusion, bereft of discernment to see God with their own eyes, or hear his melody with their own ears." Thus have we found them, as thou also dost witness. Thus have their superstitions become veils between them and their own hearts, and kept them from the path of God. In one of his writings, in Tablets of Ahmad, Baha'u'llah said it was God's intention that the people's capacity be increased in this day to such an extent that they would be able to, on their own, recognize the promised land. And here Baha'u'llah says, unfortunately, the people are wandering in the path of delusion. What is the implication here? He says, look, Ahmad, I find them this way, you see it too. They can't recognize me with their own eyes or hear my melody with their own ears. What's the implication?
You need to tell them.
Somebody needs to help them out. In the writings of the Bab, page 133 in selections, the Bab says, for most people are helpless. And wert thou to two specific things, open their hearts and dispel their doubts, they would gain admission into the faith of God.
So look at
The Bab, page 133, selections. The Bab says, most people are helpless. And wert thou to open their hearts and dispel their doubts, they would gain admission into the faith of God. So, we may infer that all of these passages, in one sense, on one level, seem to indicate that Baha'u'llah is encouraging Ahmad to go teach his cause. Now, I want to take this a little further. We find two passages in which Baha'u'llah says he's in prison. That's that the Nightingale is calling to you from his prison. And then in a few paragraphs later, remember my days during thy days, and my distress and banishment where? It's no prison. Why is Baha'u'llah emphasized twice? Not once, twice. He's in prison.
Because he can go teach himself. So
There.
has to do it for him.
Yes. Fabulous, that's right. What Baha'u'llah, take those two sentences, the best of the Nightingale is calling to him from his prison. He had but to deliver this clear message. And another level, you see, Baha'u'llah has been commissioned by God to deliver this clear message. It turns out, from my dear friend Kazet, who helped me with the Quranic references, he had but to deliver this clear message is almost, a statement straight out of the Quran. There are 4 references in the Quran, as I recall, in which it says, it's revealed, the purpose of messengers, the purpose of apostles is to bring the message clearly. The purpose of an apostle, of all apostles, is to deliver a message clearly. So what's Baha'u'llah doing on one level? See, in another sense here, in this passage, just that the Nightingale is calling to you from this prison. Remember who he's directed this to. This is the Baha'is and the Muslims. And he says, he hath but to deliver this clear message right out of the Quran. So this Quranic allusion or reference then is Baha'u'llah stating, my mission is given to me by God is the same as the testimony in the Quran in which it says that apostles are to deliver a clear message. So historically, culturally, what is this saying? We know that in Baha'u'llah's writings he said, if the people would simply, and Bob said this too, they would simply take the testimony of the Quran, they would then, and be fair in their judgment, they would recognize it. So this is one of those Quranic references, it appears, on another level. Where Baha'u'llah is saying, my mission is the same as the mission of Muhammad, given to me by God. You see, so what is his mission? To deliver this message to the people of the world. In the Tablet of Carmel, Baha'u'llah says, oh, how I long to announce unto every spot of the face of the earth the joyful tidings of this revelation, to bring to all its peoples the joyful tidings of this revelation. So here he is in the Tablet of Ahmad saying, I'm in prison, I can't do this. And he's saying, he's really, I suggest to you that in one level, see, he's telling Ahmad, this is my mission. God has given me this mission to take on the sufferings of the world. I'm supposed to deliver the message, but my enemies have imprisoned me. And in one of his writings, he says, and they will continue to imprison me the rest of all the days of my life. So he cannot go deliver the message. And so the implication is, Ahmad, please do it on my behalf. Right? And I suggest there's more to it. Ahmad was on his way to visit Baha'u'llah. Before we read this over, there's a glaring omission here. Is there any place in the Tablet of Ahmad where Baha'u'llah says, okay, Ahmad, come visit me and join me in exile? There's not, is there? It's a glaring omission. And surely Ahmad would have, we may infer, recognize this. Baha'u'llah is not inviting me to come join him and be in exile. The implication, too, I suggest, and this is probably why you had to read it many, many times to catch this. You know, probably fewer times than I did, but of course. The implication is, I suggest, maybe the Baha'i is saying, this is my mission, and I'm giving you another mission, a different mission. It's not to be in exile with me, but it's to do something else. And then, so if you take that paragraph that starts, oh Ahmad, you're getting on my donkeys while I'm absent. In one sense, it may be that that paragraph is like this loving farewell letter from one dearly loved friend to another. You know, remember my days tonight, remember all the wonderful times we had together, etc., etc. But I'm suffering here, I have to do this. And what I want you to do, and he says, be thou so steadfast in my love that thy heart shall not waver, whatever happens to you. And then it may be that the next paragraph then is the mission again. More clearly, or in one sense. He says, be thou as a flame of fire to my enemies, and a river of life eternal to my loved ones. And then what? And be not of those who doubt. Okay? So it's a call to Ahmad and a call to us. What is it saying? It says our mission, as called by Baha'u'llah in our lives, is to be a flame of fire to the enemies and a river of life eternal to the loved ones. And be not of those who doubt that this is our mission. The other night, Kambiz told us that the counselor said that it is no coincidence that we're Baha'i. Somehow, for some mysterious reason, we've been chosen to be the helpers of God's cause. And here in the Tablet of Ahmad, be not of those who doubt. Maybe in one sense he's saying, but do not doubt that I've chosen you. Do not doubt that this is your mission in life, to be a flame of fire and a river of life eternal. Do not doubt this is why I've called you into being. Do not doubt that this is why I've created you. It's just very, very powerful. I want to suggest one other thing along these lines. Am I blowing you away? Is this too much?
No, you have 10 more minutes.
Okay, all right, I'll go. I'll speak faster. Okay. And then backing up a few paragraphs, thus said the Nightingale letter is calling to you for this busy effort to deliver this clear message. Then the next two sentences, so apparently gentle. Whosoever desires, let him turn aside from his counsel. Whosoever desires, let him choose the path to his Lord. So what is Baha'u'llah telling us here? In one sense, he seems to be saying, if you hear my call, respond. I'm calling you to arise and serve the cause. And what he seems to be saying, he says, I give you the choice. I give you the choice of whether you're going to serve or not, but I also give you the choice of how you are going to serve. Let him choose the path to his Lord. What, in one sense, is the essential? The essential is we arise to serve. But he does not say, you have to do it this way, and you can only do this, and this is the only thing acceptable. He gives us the choice, and then he blesses us. You know, forgetting on my bounties, that's for everyone. So it doesn't matter. Some of us can arise and go pioneering. Some of us can teach, or outwardly, or have fireside. Some of us can deepen. Some of us can show hospitality. Some of us can help with children's classes. Some of us can help prepare meals. Some of us can call people. Some of us can visit people. There's a variety of services, and they're all necessary to nurture the loved ones in the cause of God and so forth. And Baha'u'llah gives us the choice. As long as we arise to serve, that's the key thing I think he's saying. Now, in the 2 minutes I have left, okay, I want to go to this other mystery. What is it in the Tablet of Ahmad that empowered Ahmad, comforted his heart that he could give up being with Baha'u'llah physically and go off and teach? Because he could no longer stand being separated from Baha'u'llah. I suggest to you there's several things. And then back to our special paragraph, oh, Ahmad, forgetting on my donkeys while I am absent. But what does it mean if I were to leave here today and say, I'm going to be gone for a while? Take care of yourself while I'm gone. What does that mean? What do you mean? Is it permanent? It's temporary. So what is Baha'u'llah saying? Our physical absence is temporary. This isn't permanent. This is a temporary physical absence. And I suggest there are other things in here which suggest that Baha'u'llah may be telling Ahmad, don't worry about the fact that you're physically separated from me. Our physical separation is going to be pure bounty for you. Now, here's another thing from the Quran which indicates this. In the Quran, there is a verse which ties two opposite words together. It ties remote or remoteness and nearness or closeness together. The Quran is mostly, it says, it's a warning for the people to expect the coming of the promised one. And so there's a lot of themes about that in the Quran, 5 verses. And in one place, it's talking about coming to the promised one, and it says, they imagine it to be far away, to be remote from them. But actually, it is quite near at hand. So the scholars of the Quran have concluded that there's these opposites, you see. What appears to be remote, God is saying what appears to be very remote is actually quite near at hand. And the Quran talks about God being closer than our neck veins to us. And we know in the writings Baha'i says the same thing, Shoghi Effendi translates it closer than our life vein. So where do we find this remoteness and nearness in the Tablet of Ahmad? We find it in the same paragraph. O Ahmad, forget not my bounties while I'm absent. Remember my days during thy days and my distress and banishment in this remote prison. There's the word remote. So Ahmad reads this tablet, and any others read this tablet, and they see that Baha'u'llah is physically remote from them. So what does the Quran say? You imagine him to be remote, but actually he's quite near at hand. So where's the nearness? Back in the opening paragraph of the Tablet of Ahmad, proclaiming to the sincere ones the glad tidings of the nearness of God. So in this mystical sense, you see, Baha'u'llah is saying, don't worry about my physical remoteness. Spiritually, I'm near at hand to you. I'm closer to you spiritually than your own life vein. I'm with you always. Spiritually, you have me near. O Ahmad, chant this tablet during thy days, and hold not thyself therefrom, for verily God hath ordained for the one who chants it, the reward of 100 martyrs. What's the reward? We don't know. But in one sense, what the Baha'i tells us is that every martyr desires to be with their Lord in the next world, to witness His glory. So I suggest to you that this concept of the reward is the presence of Allah and the spirit of His life. So I suggest to you that it may be that this mysterious magnetic power which we feel from the Tablet of Ahmad, or Shoghi Effendi says it's been invested with a special potency and significance, that we can enter into a much closer communion with our Lord. Maybe, if Allah is saying, you can't be with me physically, but in using His tablet, you can feel my love and you can feel the spirit of my presence. I suggest to you that this may be one of the special bounties and powers of this tablet. Later on in that paragraph, it just said reward of 100 martyrs. Then what does he say? What's the next sentence? Huh? Oh, I'm servicing both words. I'm sorry. I got it. What's the next? Okay, hang on. These favors. Do we earn favors? Huh? When somebody gives you a favor, is it because you earned it? No. What does it say? What's the verb? These favors have we bestowed. They're gifts, right? We don't earn them. We're not worthy of them. We don't do something to become worthy of them. They're favors. And then what does he say? These favors that we bestowed upon thee as found on our part. Nothing to do with deserving. And
Mercy from our presence.
from where?
Our presence.
What is the implication? He's saying His presence. A mercy, a kindness beyond what can be expected. That's mercy from our presence. The gift of His presence. The spirit of His love. Forget not my bounties while I'm physically away from you. haven't gotten to there is no God but God, but we're about out of time. We got,
You got over 5 minutes.
you understand me?
I said 10, not 2. I'm sorry. It was my mind.
Didn't understand.
Got more out of it for.
Okay, let me refocus then. I almost want to just end on this love, because it's so great. The bounties are so great. And we need to realize, at the very end of that paragraph, and mercy from our presence, that thou what?
Let us be of those who are great.
Tremendous implications here. But one of the things I've heard so many Baha'is now and then, and I know I felt this way, we always feel unworthy, we don't feel worthy of. I've heard Baha'is say, you pray to God, ask Baha'u'llah to help you in here, and I've heard Baha'is over the years saying, oh, well, I'm not really worthy, Baha'u'llah has more important things to do, running the world, and help me out. And that's a lack of understanding of the station of the manifestation. There's a statement in, I believe it's the book of Surgery, Baha'u'llah says, the station of manifestation is such that no thing prevented him from being involved in any other thing. It's incomprehensible to us. But I suggest to you the implications of that is that you have 5 billion people praying, he's answering all 5 billion prayers, and then you turn around and pray, and he continues to answer all 5 billion and answers yours too. You see, no thing prevented him from being involved in any other thing. He expects us to turn to him. We're not taking it away from something else. See, the thou mayest be of those who are grateful. We should not think, oh, Baha'u'llah, I'm not worthy of these favors, I'm not worthy of your love, I'm not worthy of your presence. He wants you to be grateful. Somebody offers you a gift. What is showing gratefulness?
Say thank you.
And accept the gift. There's an old saying that accepting a gift honors the gift giver. So in one sense, I suggest to you, when he says that thou mayest be of those who are grateful, he's simply asking us to accept his gift. Okay, if we have a couple of minutes.
Yes, we have 5 more minutes.
All right, you keep telling me I have 5 more minutes. Okay, let's go back. Now I'm going to go to something a little more esoteric, but also important. Let's go back. Ahmad had prayed this 12,000 times, several times, the verse in the Quran, there is no God but God. Okay, now, what's the implications of this verse? We have to go back. When Muhammad arose in the early 600s and taught the Arabs, okay, they were savage, idolatrous people. In Mecca, they had 360 idols. They fought against Muhammad, drove him out of Mecca. He went to Medina. The people there became his followers. The people of Mecca attacked them because they hated them so much. So Muhammad had to, do his defensive battle, beat them. Came to Mecca, defeated the Meccans, went into the area which is now called Kaaba. And at that time, it had 360 idols. And Muhammad, says he went around personally, destroyed all 360 idols. And he gave the people a prayer and taught them, they had to pray every day. That prayer called the Shahada, Allah Akbar, God is most great, God is most great. And has a couple of other lines, and probably more. It says, there is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger or the apostle of God. In Arabic, there is no God but God is literally no God, small g, but Allah. Okay? Meaning, in one sense, it's the foundation of Islamic belief. Idols are not God. Deities, false images are not God. There is only one God. In Arabic, the name is Allah, but it's the same divine being as every other. And Muhammad taught the concept of a transcendent God. What does this mean? Okay? If we think of Judeo-Christian, belief, there's an image of God. What's the traditional Christian image of God? The old man in the white beard sitting on the throne, some physical place in the universe? This is the idea of a God who's physical in the image of man, instead of man in the image of God. And he's part of physical creation. That's limited. That's like the painter being part of his painting, etc. Okay, Muhammad, the first messenger of God, to teach the people that God transcends his creation. He is the creator of all. And there are these statements, church statements throughout the Quran. Exalted is he above all else. He has no peer like. Powerful is he above all. He is the creator of all. And there are none to compare him to him. statements on and on and on, which indicate the transcendent nature of the one true God, Baha'u'llah. And he's not part of his physical creation, but he rules all of creation. He's all-powerful, omnipotent over creation. And this is all embodied in this statement, there is no God but God. No God but Allah. Okay. So Muhammad, we've been taught that Abraham taught monotheism. That's true, but Muhammad retaught it. And he taught it at a much higher level, higher standard. And this is the foundation in Islam of what's called divine unity. And you find this concept of divine unity in the writings of Bab and the teachings of Baha'u'llah. And they have extended it. They've extended it to say that God is unknowable. The essence of God is unknowable. And the only way God can be known is through his messengers, through Baha'i terminology and manifestation. The one whom he sends, who represents him, who reflects his attributes and so on. All right. Now this is embodied in the verse in the Tablet of Ahmad. Baha'u'llah says, "O Ahmad, bear thou witness that verily he is God and there is no God but him, the king, the protector, the incomparable, the omnipotent." Okay, there is this verse. There is no God but God, but it has something in front of it. Verily he is God. But on one level, it appears that what Baha'u'llah, in one sense, what Baha'u'llah is saying to Ahmad is, God heard your call, your 12,000 prostrations that you did several times when you prayed, there is no God but God. It was not in vain, Ahmad. He heard it, he's responded to you.
Oh my God.
He led you to recognize and meet the Bab, and he led you to recognize and meet me. He fulfilled your heart's desire. God knew what you were doing those 25 years.
Thank you. Please